I could be, rendered by the CIA. I could have people come after me, or any of their third-party partners. They work closely with a number of other nations, or they could pay off the triads, or any of their agents or assets. We've got a CIA station just up the road in the consulate here in Hong Kong, and I'm sure they're going to be very busy for the next week. And that's a fear I'll live under for the rest of my life, however long that happens to be.
All right, there's Edward Snowden, fearing for his life wherever he may live that life. We don't know where he is anymore. They say he left Hong Kong. Joining us now to talk about everything and more, that's going to take a while, is our friend Dr. Jason Johnson, politics editor for The Source magazine and chief political correspondent for Politic365.com. Hey, must be that time of week again, Doc. How are you?
I'm feeling pretty good, Steve.
Good. Good. Glad to hear it. Okay, so let me ask you. We had, from what I understand, both Glenn Beck and Michael Moore saying that Edward Snowden is a hero. How do you view him?
Yeah, this is like political apocalypse when you have Glenn Beck and Michael Moore agreeing. I actually do agree. I think that really ever since 9/11, there's just been this increasing growth of executive power, this justification for any sort of violation of civil liberties, all in the name of fighting this war. And I think just about anybody who has come forward and said, look, we need to know what's being done in our name. I do think they're heroes, and I'm glad he's done what he's done.
Well, this isn't, look, we need to know what's being done in our name. You could have done that and tried to go to your congressman or whatever. What he did was he broke an oath and divulged classified information to the media and to the world, which puts that program certainly in jeopardy and could put lives in jeopardy. What I've been saying all along to people is today I think we need to separate. You may admire or not admire what he did. Or actually, let me rephrase. You may like or not like or trust or not trust the program, but this guy's a criminal. And they should get him, and they should try him, as Dianne Feinstein said, as Peter King has said, as others have said, put to the fullest extent of the law, because he's a traitor.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call him a traitor. What I would say is this, and legally the weeds here are somewhat hard to determine. There's a difference between leaking information and being a whistleblower. He's not exposing anything that's illegal. That's the issue. A whistleblower is someone who says, hey, look, the company I'm working for is putting chemicals inside baby formula, or this government agency is wasting our tax money and we need to do something about it because this is not what the money is supposed to be used for. He did break the law, and he is going to suffer consequences because he broke the law. But I think what he has exposed is important, in the attention that it brings and the pressure that it'll bring to the administration. I think is ultimately a good thing. I'm not saying he shouldn't get in trouble.
Well, okay, so you agree, but you do view him as a hero, and I'm curious as to why. I mean, you kind of said it, but I'm curious as to why.
Well, because basically, I think there are a lot of us have become, not myself, but I think a lot of Americans have become complacent. And when we are complacent, it allows the government to do whatever it is they want to do under the justification of stopping the war on terror. Look, there are a lot of things that we have to do. It's the speech from a few good men. There's a lot of things our government has to do to keep us safe that us regular people don't need to be involved in. But when you get to the point where you're just like trawling for shrimp and dragging information from people all over the country, that kind of mission creep is problematic. And I think if this brings light to it and forces the government to be more focused in stopping terrorism and not just investigating regular people's lives, I think that's a net positive.
But, when I laugh because when the George Bush administration listened in on the phone calls, which I know is supposedly not going on here, listened in on the phone calls in a targeted way for people who were suspected of either making calls to terrorists or receiving calls from terrorists, the left went nuts.
Well, I think there's a slight difference. And the difference is, look, I think it's all problematic, to be perfectly honest with you. I think the difference in the minds of some people is that listening to actual phone call content versus simply seeing who is calling who is considered to be a greater violation. As far as I'm concerned, again, I'm not in the business of constantly second-guessing the Department of Justice or our national security agencies. But I do think that the opportunity for abuse the opportunity for individual rogue members of our government, regardless of the administration, to use this to hassle their ex-wives or hassle political.
You mean like the IRS is done to conservatives?
That's what I'm saying. The idea that you can have groups of people that use these powers for their own political ends, that's where we need to be concerned as American citizens. And I think it applies to both. So yes, that's always a concern when you have this kind of free reign.
Of course, this whistleblower, Edward Snowden, or whatever you want to call him, not a whistleblower, that gives him a kind of legal status and protection. He was not alleging. He was saying this could happen, that could happen, you could be victimized, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't point to any specifics that he knew of where it was happening. And it's interesting in that context. I want to let you hear 38. I believe this is Congressman Mike Rogers on CBS. And to me, this is what the question really is. And this is why I'm torn. I mean, because, if it prevents if it prevents a terrorist attack, I'm all for it. And you had the president, which to me, before we get to that cut, there's a little hypocrisy here. On one hand, the president said the other day, you can't expect 100% privacy. You can't expect no inconvenience and have your security protected as well. And I'll buy that. But don't tell that to me, an American citizen, and then at the same time say we got to let those accused terrorists at Gitmo go when we know at least some of them will return to trying to kill Americans. And don't tell me that we can't stick a terrorist head underwater to try to find out where the next attack might be to save American lives. When if you're not going to do that, then don't tell me I got to be inconvenienced.
Well, I think there's a big difference between being inconvenienced and being tortured.
That's not torture.
And the difference is that the Constitution and the UN and everyone said it was illegal. It was illegal to torture people, and
it's not torture. We train our soldiers with waterboarding.
Between what Snowden is talking about now and some of the issues that we may have had in the past, because what he has leaked about is not illegal. It's not illegal by any definition of American law. It's not illegal by any previous precedent, certainly over the last 10 or 12 years. So again, to me, I think this is a larger problem, and I've said this has been going on. I don't care whose administration it is. I am uncomfortable with any federal government having this sort of just open-ended authority to keep looking at whoever they want to look at. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a Democrat. So, I knew from the moment that, from the moment we were suffering through 9/11 and our country was in mourning and realized, look, we need to streamline the way we look for enemies, both domestic and abroad, that I was like, the moment we open up this toy chest, no administration is going to put these toys away. And so you have to think really responsibly. Look, we may be comfortable giving this power to George Bush, but do we want to give it to Obama? Do we want to give it to the person who comes after them? That's what I think a lot of Americans have failed to realize. When you open up this level of power, you're giving it to any administration, and some of them you may not trust.
All right, we're talking to Dr. Jason Johnson here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Let me ask you this: the National Security Agency's top secret, PRISM program, the whole system that collects the emails, the video, the web chats, the photos on foreigners, etc. They say that that's the biggest contributor of information to President Barack Obama's Daily Intelligence Briefing, known as the PDB. The problem is, according to a report by the Government Accountability Institute, they find that for the first 1,532 days of Obama's term in office, which takes us up to March 31st of this year, Barack Obama only attended 42.1% of his daily intelligence briefings. Now, I have, and I'm going to admit this up front, because I hate when they say, oh, only 3% of New York City's fire department are black, and they don't give me any reference statistics and tell me what that means, or how many blacks took the test, or blah, 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 how many applied, how many are interested. But so I don't know what the percentage was for Bush, what the percentage was for Clinton, although Clinton was pre-9/11. But that Barack Obama, in this day and age, only attends 41% of his daily intelligence briefings, there's got to be something wrong with that.
I don't necessarily think so, and believe it or not, it's exactly for the reasons that you mentioned. I can't imagine that if Barack Obama doesn't attend his 7 a.m. daily briefing meeting, that he doesn't get the information at some point throughout the day.
What, on the golf course?
I doubt that he is on the golf course every single morning, for 67%.
Well, what's more important than getting the daily briefing?
The reality is we don't know when the president receives his information. So just because you may not be at that meeting in the morning, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't get the information. And to be perfectly honest, if you look at the history of this country over the 5 years or whatever it is of his presidency, I would say the guy seems to be attending at least enough to do something about, Osama bin Laden and some of the other places we've been involved in. So again, when you want to get into the weeds, like you said, I don't know how many briefings George Bush went to. I don't know how many briefings Bill Clinton went to. I don't know how many briefings Reagan went to when we were.
Yeah, but again, we're in a post 9/11 world now. That's what I'm talking. That's why I even discount Clinton. The Bush would be the barometer to me. All right, let's move on from that because I don't know how you could say he's done enough. He's kind of getting enough because we got Osama bin Laden. I mean, that's
The previous administration couldn't catch a guy for 7 years.
Oh it was the Bush administration. Yeah, it was. You're right. It was Cheney out there in the mountains, and it was Rumsfeld out there in the mountains. And please don't get me started. Bill Clinton turned down Osama bin Laden on a silver platter twice because of Sandy Berger and other considerations. But let's move on to the IRS. Elijah Cummings said something which is mind-boggling, helped by Candy Crowley, he did call it a terrorist attack, Governor, which of course he didn't. But here's Elijah Cummings on CNN with Candy Crowley, cut 25. See if we get that in there, cut 25.
Right. Right. But there still was somebody somewhere after that wrote a bolo and said, hey, let's pull out Tea Party. That's what I was trying to get to. Final question that I have to ask you, and that is, as far as you are concerned, based on the information that you now have, which in its totality is greater than ours, is this case over? Have you solved the case of the IRS and how this came to be?
Based upon everything I've seen, the case is solved. And if it were me, I would wrap this case up and move on, to be frank with you. In other words, I think we need to the IRS, by the way, the IG made some recommendations.
Right.
Those recommendations are being adopted by the IRS. We've got a new acting commissioner,
right.
Danny Werfel, doing a great job. I think we're in great shape.
Changes, but you think the investigation is over. You know enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that from you, Congressman. Now I can move on. The investigation is over. We know enough. What do we know?
Well, look, what I'm going to say is this: until both Cummings and Darrell Issa, until they agree to release all of the transcripts of all of the interviews, I think it would be fairer for the public to get to see everything that was said, to see whether the investigation should end. But I got to say this: as far as what Representative Issa has released, he hasn't been able to prove. I mean, first off, there are people who've been fired, there are people who've been reprimanded, which is what should happen.
And promoted.
But the larger issue, the most important issue that anybody should be concerned with is, does this at any point end up on the desk of Barack Obama or any of his top staff people? Does it end up on the desk of somebody who sat there with him every day and said, this is what we're doing out of Cincinnati? That's the real question. Right now, neither Issa nor Cummings have said, look, there's information that directly implicates the president. That's the primary concern. And so if that's not the case, I think it might be premature to say the investigation is over, but certainly we don't have the smoking gun yet that I think many on the right are definitely looking for.
Well, first of all, whether or not it goes all the way to Obama is one thing, but we need to know who. When asked who ordered, who was involved in the ordering and the instituting of the program, et cetera, we had one person take the fifth, and we had others say, including the former head of the IRS, saying, I can't give you names. I don't know names. So it's not like it's been proved that it was Joe Schmo, and here's his name. They say, oh, we don't know. That's hardly the end of an investigation.
But here's the problem. I'm looking at, and it's the same thing we're talking about with Snowden. The issue is the abuse of executive power, because we want to find out if this is Nixonian, if this is the president.
That's one thing we want to find out, but you got to find out how to prevent it from happening again at the very least. And if we don't know how it happened this time, how are you going to stop it the next time?
Unfortunately, and I said this before, it was the same thing as when the Bush administration had people going after the NAACP.
Yeah, I know you got one example, and then you can't compare that to this. But go ahead.
There's absolutely no way that you can prevent in a huge organization, I don't care what organization it is, I don't care if it's public or private, you can't prevent some groups of people from behaving unprofessionally. The best you can do is try to stop them.
But you don't know that's what happened here. You don't know how high up this went. Nobody knows.
But the idea is, and like I said, I don't think that it would be fair, I don't think it would be reasonable to end an investigation until we see all the transcripts.
Okay,
But when we see the transcripts, we may find out that, like, look, it was a group of 5, 6, 10, 12 people who thought this was a good idea. It could be incompetence. It could be political investigations. But again, unless we can find that it stops at the White House, I don't see where the big red herring is, since people are already getting in trouble and getting reprimanded.
No, people have gotten promoted. The one guy who got kicked out, the acting head of the IRS, was due to leave 2 weeks later. The woman who started it all is now the head of the IRS for Obamacare. People are getting promoted.
Not everyone is getting promoted. There have been a number of people who've been released. There have been a number of people who've been fired. And again, and I'll ask this, and I think this is also a very important thing about how our government works in general. After Citizens United, I really think that what some of these people were doing, obviously some of them have political motivation, but either they were just absolutely driven by their politics or they're incompetent, because we don't have a lot of evidence. We don't have a long list of Tea Party organizations that were denied. I mean, if the plan was politically to destroy the right or to stop Tea Party groups from starting completely, it didn't work very well.
No, but Jason, you intimidate people. You don't have to stamp denied on the application. You just ask for their, what they ate for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and how much salt they put in their food.
And that is wrong. And that is completely wrong. And it's been wrong whether it's been this administration, the Clinton administration, the Bush administration.
It wasn't the Clinton administration, and it wasn't the Bush administration. It was only this administration. And don't give me the NAACP again. That's one example, and they had reason to do it. That wasn't random targeting of every liberal group.
2000 election.
All right.
The point is, this kind of behavior is inappropriate and it is problematic regardless of the administration. But unless we can find out that it's directly Barack Obama's responsibility, in which case, if it is, that he should be in major trouble, we can't pretend that the sky is falling if we don't have that evidence.
All right. I appreciate your time, sir, as always. Dr. Jason Johnson, until next time, thank you.
Thank you.